How's it going, everybody? Today we're going to be taking a look at another 4cm Beastbox figure, and that is BB-63C Wandering Star. And this one's following on my most recent review of the Beastbox Goldfish, BB-59A, B, and C. That's Halo, Orbital, and Unreal. And it just happens to be a coincidence that I'm reviewing 4cm figures 2 videos in a row. I should step back and say for a long time, the only 4cm figure that was available was the original Dio. And then all of a sudden, just within the past few years, 5T Toys started regularly producing figures of this size. And I believe these are being positioned as a more basic, more affordable figure. A standard Beastbox these days is around $27, $28, up to $32, somewhere in that price range. These will typically go for about $20, sometimes $17 or $18 or something like that. You know, a more basic figure, but definitely more affordable for sure. So for today's review, I'm gonna pull it out of its package. I'm gonna show you the package details and what comes in the box. We'll take a look at the figure details. I'll do a transformation demo into its box mode, and then I'll wrap it up with the box grade and some final comments. So let's jump right in. So first thing we want to do, obviously, is get it out of the box, and we're just going to cut open the sticker tab here. But before we open it up, I want to take a look at some details around the box here. So on the front, you have some nice artwork of the figure, and that, of course, is BB-63C Wandering Star. And curiously enough, though, I think these figures are geared more towards children, but for some reason they have a label on here that says age 15 plus, so I don't know why that is. A kid could definitely play with this, so that age suggestion to me is a little bit questionable. I don't know why they do that. Anyways, on the sides here, you got some details about what comes in the package and what this thing does. Obviously, you've got the figure, and it has a collapsible box charger filler insert, which does open up and the figure can be stored inside that. And I'll show you a little bit more about that in just a minute. Around the back here, we have more details about the production here. Obviously produced by 5T Toys, designed by their in-house team, XOR, and some more interesting stuff. If you can read Chinese or just want to find more details about this figure, it's right there on the back. And of course, we're showing beast mode and box mode on the side here. So we're going to get this open. Pretty simple plastic bubble card here. And inside, we have instructions, and we have catalogs and things, and this is interesting. This is an oversized character card, and I don't know how many they've done this for, but this is the same size that came with the Goldfish. I'm not sure how many other figures have this particular size of card. We'll take a look at that here for just a second. Yeah, so it's got some figure stats on here, and this is kind of reminiscent of the very earliest Beastbox releases, at least the 5cm size. They had a similar stat setup. I pointed out what that looks like in my Neo Geo review that included Joe Jobs at the beginning of the review, and I can link to that in the descriptions. Definitely worth taking a look, and of course we do have the aquatic symbol here, so this is part of the aquatic faction. No character bio on the back here, but we do show box mode to beast mode. Pretty nice looking card one way or the other. And of course inside the bubble card, kind of an oversized bubble card. That's interesting. So they put the figure inside here in its actual animal form, untransformed. Yeah, just got a lid there. And there again, you got the filler insert, and you got the figure itself. Pretty cute little guy. Yeah, so we got these little gill stalks here. Just pop that out and rotate that around, and that's about what this critter would look like in the wild. Yeah, let's move this stuff out of the way and we'll talk about some figure details. So I've got its legs positioned here in maybe what you might call a doggy mode. And being an aquatic creature, it's really going to crawl around. It's not going to walk on all fours like a dog or a cat or whatever. Just looking at the box here, that kind of gives you an idea of what the leg position should be. So we want these out to the side, and I guess the back paws or feet or whatever kind of rotate out to the side like that. And you get the front legs positioned in about that position. So these side panel pieces did not come fastened in the box. So that's something just to be aware of, that if you want to play around with this figure right out of the box, you're probably going to have to move some parts around just to make sure everything's secure in place. What I would say is this is a type of salamander. It's called an axolotl. This is native to South America, and I believe just around the Mexico region. Could be wrong about that. I did a little basic research on this, and apparently they're an endangered species. They're almost non-existent in the wild right now, and they're very unique in the animal kingdom in 2 ways. One, most notably, that they have a unique healing factor. So as I understood it, if they have an injury or whatever, then they don't really produce scar tissue. They actually regenerate their skin or something like like that. So apparently that's pretty unique in the animal kingdom. And also, of course, you have these gill stalks here, which is very unique even to salamanders. So plus, you know, they have that kind of cute little face, the little baby face that really lends itself to sort of a cartoony little action figure, if you will. So and this one is really nicely designed. So as far as articulation, we don't need to go into great detail here because there isn't a whole lot to talk about with an animal like a salamander. Like I said, anywhere it's going to be in contact with any kind of ground or whatever, it's really going to crawl along. And for the most part, other than that, it just swims around. It is very much an amphibious creature. You got a little bit of a moving tail here. That's pretty cool. So yeah, I can float around. Whoops. And that will come off. The head can turn left and right, and you do have a little bit of rotation. It can turn its head up, look around like that, and because the legs are on ball joints, you do have some mobility to kind of articulate the limbs or whatever. You can splay them out if you want. So really, it's not so much about making this an action figure as much as just kind of giving it some expressiveness, if that makes sense. And for the most part, emulating what this animal would do in real life, which I think is pretty accurate here. It probably could use a little bit of hip rotation or whatever to kind of have that emulated swimming look, but for a 4-centimeter figure, I'm not going to argue that point too much. It does have some beautiful coloring on here. So you got some deep purple, kind of twilight colors, if you will. Aquatic blue, of course. Some silver accents on here, and some nice kind of light purple or violet accents on the gill stalks here. So there is a little bit of subtle shading inside of the eye slits here. So silver eyes painted in there, of course. And then these blue insets here that I believe they're painted in. That's what it looks like it is. And this unique piece on here, I'm not sure how to describe it. It's kind of pearlescent, not exactly transparent, but it kind of is. And you can kind of see some light reflectiveness. It's almost like a holographic type image on there. It's hard to explain, but it looks really cool. And then this stamped in silver piece on top here. So the head sculpt on its own is very nicely stylized. And of course, the aquatic faction symbol. So can't forget that. So yeah, there again, there's not a whole lot to go on for detail here. I think it is a pretty neat little figure for, you know, 20 bucks or whatever this thing ended up costing me. Very good one to have in a collection, that's for sure. One other thing I would say is on the bottom here, gonna have a little trouble finding a decent way to pose this thing or display it on a shelf or whatever, is on the underside, there isn't a peg hole here or anything to display this on, and I don't have a display stand handy right now. That's another little detail here. On the underside of the jaw here, you got some transparent blue panels here, so that's pretty nice. Jaw does not open and close, of course. It just has kind of a very wide mouth slit looking thing, but that's pretty much what it looks like. But yeah, anyways, it does have, I believe that's a 5mm peg hole here. And there again, I don't have a stand handy, but I would imagine there's surely enough balance on this thing that you could put this on a 5mm post and it should hold its weight up fine. Although it'll probably look kind of awkward being held up there by its head like that. Yeah, overall, I think it's a pretty darn cool looking little figure. It's just kind of your basic bunch here for a 4-centimeter figure. Definitely fits within the figures of that type for this size and price range. So, and what I would say for sure, as far as 5.2 Toys goes, is that regardless of the price point or the size of the figure or whatever, they really never skimp on details. So you'll find a lot of really nice painted in details and whatever on any figure, even something this size. So if you buy a smaller figure, basically, I would definitely say that they didn't throw it out there just to cheap out. It just happens to be a smaller figure with fewer features and gimmicks and details and things like that. All right, so now we're going to get into a transformation demo. Before we do, there's a couple things I want to point out here, and this is me just discovering stuff since I just pulled this out of the box. So a couple things to note is, for one thing, you do have a lot of joints that are connected with ball joints. They're kind of dependent on swiveling and turning around those ball joints, so you may find some pieces might pop off. Obviously, they're going to pop back on just as easily, just something to be aware of. And the tail in particular is just connected with this kind of tab and pose connection here, and it comes off really easy, which isn't a failure or anything of this particular figure. It's kind of annoying. It's one part you probably will find yourself having to reattach more often than you care to. Also, this figure only came partly transformed in the box. It's not in its full figure mode. I did find that it has this additional joint in the middle, which needs to slide out for the full transformation. So you do have an extra little bit of articulation there, so you can kind of emulate this creature swimming, which I think is pretty darn cool, if you can keep the damn tail on. Having said that, let's go ahead and do the transformation. Now for the gill stalks, that's the first step you want to do here. These have tab connections and a little post here on the side, and you're just going to rotate that forward and connect it to the side of the head, about like that. Same on the opposite side. Rotate the head around 180 degrees. You may find it advantageous at this point to pull these side skirt pieces out and out of the way. You can pop those open. They're just connected with a tab here on the bottom, and then you're going to rotate them up and over. And what'll happen is there's a post here, a secondary post, and it'll connect into that top spot there. So that'll just push in like that above this lower post. Do the same on the other side, and we'll get those arms a little bit out of the way for now. And we're going to rotate the head straight down. What we're going to have to do is tilt the head up a little bit to get that out of the way, to get this panel to rotate up and over. Then we'll go ahead and rotate that down and over. There's a couple of tab and post connections here for the top of the head, and they'll just plug straight into that, just like so, and it's a solid connection. Now we're going to rotate the front limbs up and around so that the circular part is facing straight up. So that's just going to come up like that, and you'll probably want to take the limb and have that rotated straight out like that. We'll just rotate that up and over, pull the limb out like that, and for the front paws, we're going to rotate those over and around and to the side. So they'll just fit into this natural groove on the side here, like so. Do the same on the opposite side, just like that. Now there's an elbow joint here, and you're going to rotate this piece around and get that tucked in next to the rib cage piece here, and that'll just lay flat up against the side, kind of flush with this gill stalk piece. Same on the opposite side, just tuck that in like so. You got like a little bit of a boot thing happening here. If you don't have the midsection pushed in, you'll just pop that in like so. And we're going to rotate the hind limbs straight down. And that gives you clearance to open up these side skirt pieces. Now, this is a tab and post connection, so it's just going to flip over and around and connect on the side like so. And that kind of squares up with the top side of the figure here. So from here, you're going to want to rotate the hind leg straight back, like so. And you can go ahead and leave the feet pointed down for now. Now we're going to rotate the tail piece, this entire assembly, up and over 180 degrees, like so. And the tip end will open up about like that. And it is on a secondary hinge. We'll get to that second one here in just a little bit. Now just to make sure, because of the sequence of steps, I think it's probably going to be best for you to have the legs rotated back and kind of out of the way for now. So we're going to crack open that second joint, like so. And there's another hinge here on the interior of this entire tail assembly, and you're just going to rotate that forward, get it in that position. So as you're doing that, just note that there's this post here, and they'll connect to that interior post on the side assembly there. So that'll clamp in there like so. It fits in there pretty naturally, so it's not something you really have to fight with. And then the hind legs, you'll just want to rotate the feet. As far as I can tell, there's nothing for them to tab into. They just sort of sit in there with friction. And there's your box mode. Yeah, so overall, I guess it's kind of a cube. I mean, you have this split open side here, and this is kind of a problem with 4cm figures, or at least this is kind of the way they're going, is they're neat little figures. They look great in their animal mode, but when you get them into box mode, man, that's where you really see the compromise. So yes, these are called beast boxes, quote unquote, but the box mode is seriously lacking, at least on the more recent 4cm figure releases. So let's take a look at what we've got here. There again, it came with the box charger filler insert, and that's just a simple accordion style piece. You just pop that open like so, open the sides. There is a hinge piece. You don't have to use it, but it does have a backer on here, and it kind of gives it a little bit more stability. So you can push in from this tab here, it'll push that down, and it'll snap into place on this back panel here. Figure goes in there. A little bit of a snug fit on this one, or at least there are certain sides that it doesn't seem to want to slide in as easily as others. Certain directions. Yeah, overall it definitely works. Now as far as this being a filler insert, this is the insert part of that. So if you have an actual 5cm box charger, they'll fit right inside that, like so. And at least with the older style box charger, and by older style, I mean this type that does not have the knobs and stuff like that on the front and on the sides and on the top and whatever. It can sit right on top there. No attachment or anything like that, even though it does have connection ports here, which I think is a little bit of a shortcoming of the box charger design. If you've got a series of 4cm figures, all of these filler inserts will stack together. They just can't connect with the 5cm box charger. And that's the interesting thing about beast boxes is, by design, they have a stacking and storage system, so that's pretty cool. Now it's time to give this Wandering Water Sprite a box grade. This is my rating system of 6 categories of 5 points each for a total score of anything from 0 to 30 points. Character, quote unquote, is something I think that can be inferred from a character bio, any design cues or features that speak to its intent, and importantly, its animal characteristics. Wandering Star has a charming, cartoony, chibi style design, and it's as fun to fiddle around with as any other beast box, but on the subject of character, it's not really speaking to me, if that makes sense. 2 out of 5. This is a lower price, lower fidelity figure design, and it doesn't come with anything more than a filler insert. Other 4cm figures have at least a little bit of something that enhances their theme or playability. Jetstream's waddling wheels, for example, or the goldfish coral reef stands. It would have been helped by at least including a couple of well-placed accessory parts, and even its display capability is limited to non-existent. 1 out of 5. Transformation is a pretty straightforward affair. The only thing you really need to look out for is getting the limbs clear so other parts can move around. Wandering Star also follows suit with my ongoing critique of the newer 4cm figure designs where the figures themselves look awesome, but the box mode barely resembles a cube at all. 2 out of 5. Being an amphibious creature, there really aren't many points of articulation that are going to be necessary to emulate the real-life animal. Wandering Star is pretty nicely done and it completes the picture with spine and tail mobility so you can make it look like it's swimming. This doesn't really translate to a particularly posable figure though. 3 out of 5. Even at this size, 5-2 Toys doesn't cheap out on its build quality or graphic applications. I'd also call attention to the number of ball joints and tailpiece that tends to want to pop off if you twist or pull on them too much, which I found to be a bit frustrating. 3 out of 5. Wandering Star is great as a display piece and fun to transform as a fiddle toy, but not much else. It's a neat little figure and in my opinion it's well worth the price. 2 out of 5. And that brings the box grade total to 13 out of 30. That's a look at 5-2 Toys' take on a robot machine cube Axolotl Wandering Star. While the newer 4cm figure series may be lacking in some areas, I think they're nice to have in a Beastbox collection. The 5cm figures have gotten significantly more sophisticated and consequentially a bigger time commitment, and for that reason less of a desk toy, so the 4cm Beastboxes are kind of filling in that gap. As always, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch this video. Stick around, I've got some pretty exciting pieces on deck for review, and hopefully I'll be able to publish them sooner than later. Please take a moment to leave a like or a comment or the usual social stuff. Thanks, I'll catch you in the next one.